Hello and welcome to Piano Shack with me, Woody. Thank you so much for tuning in. In today's video, I'd like to share with you the 3 VST audio plugins that I use to process every single video that I upload to YouTube. And in fact, these are the only plugins I use because I have a less is more approach to my audio processing, and I really want you to hear the sound of the synthesizers and keyboards that we showcase exactly as I'm hearing them, with as little manipulation as possible. So let's head over to the PC and I'll share with you what these plugins are, how I use them, and share some tips and advice to help you with your own productions. Let's get started. Yeah, really good stuff. Love the sound of that. Now, you're here for the sound of the rotary, so let's enable that now. I'll switch off the... This is a fairly typical project for me. I always have at least 2 tracks. At the top here, we have my vocal commentary. You're here for the sound of the rotary, so let's enable that now. I'll switch off the chorus so that we don't get that mixed up with the sound of the Leslie. The second track in this case is the Blue 3 VST plugin that I've captured the output of. And the third track is the audio from the Yamaha YC that we have over there. You can see on the vocal track how I've chopped it up into sections. You might be wondering why. Well, the reason is that I've isolated the parts of the vocal track where I was doing some kind of performance, and then I've turned down the gain. And the reason I do that is, of course, to mute the microphone somewhat when I'm doing a performance here on the keyboard, so you don't hear too much sound of the clunking of the keys. I don't mute it completely because that just sounds unnatural, but I just pull it down by about 6 dBs. I've also chopped up my instrumental performances. I'm looking for parts of the performances where I change a preset or a setting that maybe increased the volume quite a lot, or parts that were lower in volume. So I'm just looking for those changes in volume, splitting the clips. And let me show you what I can then do. Okay, I'm going to make that one really loud, this one really quiet. There's a lovely feature in Reaper. This is an extension I use all the time, which normalizes the loudness to -23 LUFS. Loudness units full scale. Let's run that. It analyzes it and then sets these to exactly the same volume, which is a huge time saver. Because I'll just go through my track now, normalize everything to -23. I can do them all at the same time if I want to. And now we have a nice bass line from which I can start applying my other effects. The first plugin is, of course, the EQ, and I only apply this to my vocal track. I never manipulate the instrument tracks, the synthesizers, with EQ, because I want you to hear them exactly as they come out of the synthesizer. This is my goal with all of my demonstrations of synthesizers and music instruments. So what we have here then is a EQ. I'm just basically, the setup here, I have the first 3 drawbars pulled out, rolling off everything below about 100 Hertz, because there's not much information in my voice below 100 Hertz, but I am cutting out all of any rumble, me knocking on the desk, the thunk and the clunk of the keyboard, and that kind of thing. If there's any very low frequencies in the sound, we want to remove those so we don't mess up the plugins that come later on in the chain. You can see I'm also rolling off just a little bit of the top end as well. How it sounds like right out of the preamp of the organ, and it sounds really excellent. Sometimes I do that, sometimes I don't really bother. I don't do any fancy EQ curves really, or boost the bass or anything like that. Just a little bit of a cut at the low and the top ends. And this is Rear EQ, which is one of the fabulous built-in plugins that come with Reaper. This then then is the second plugin that I always use on all of my videos, and I only apply this effect to the vocal track again. And it is R-VOX by Waves, Renaissance Vox. I bought this one for about 30 bucks when it was on sale. These are regularly on sale, so don't pay any more than that. It is a compressor that's specifically designed to work on vocals with a minimum of controls, which I really like. Let's take a listen. Explain the setup here. I have the first three. And I'm using this to compress and boost my vocals. As I mentioned, we normalized them to -23, which is far too quiet. I want to get them to about -16, which is a good balance between the music performances, which are about -13. If you have the vocals to -16, the balance is really good. So what we need to do is boost from -23 to about -16. So I'm just going to pull down the gain here. This will compress and add some makeup gain. And I know that adding about 10 dBs here will get us in the ballpark. Explain the setup here. I have the first 3 drawbars pulled out, and you can see on the meters here how much compression is being applied. So it's doing some nice gentle compression and then making up the gain as well. You don't get any other controls like attack or release or the ratio, which is typical for many other compressors. But this, I find, is really nice for my workflow. You don't need to worry about that. Waves have set it to optimal settings for vocals and it sounds really nice. Out of the preamp of the organ, and it sounds really excellent here on the YC. By adding 10 dBs of gain, that puts us at -13, which is a bit too hot, so I'm just pulling it back there by 3 dBs. This is the overall output of this plugin. Out of the preamp of the organ, and it sounds really excellent. This control here is really interesting. This applies a downwards expansion. What that means is it's actually turning down the signal when it goes below a certain threshold. So when I'm taking a pause in between my sentences or the words, then it's actually going to reduce the gain. Let's take a look at that here. So when the level drops below this threshold, then you can see a lot of gain being applied. Let's push this up. A real Hammond organ. You see all the gain. So this is a really nice way to clean up the quieter passages in between the times when you're speaking. It's also good here to just turn down the volume of the microphone when I'm not talking, so we're not capturing too much of the noise of the keys as I'm playing. Really nice. Just be careful not to have it too high, otherwise it sounds like this. Really gets it right. If you're a fan of the sound of the Hammond organ without the Leslie rotary speaker, then this is for you. One more plugin to go then, and this is what I use on all of my audio tracks containing the instruments. As I've said, we've normalized these to -23. We need to be at -13. How do we boost the gain? Well, don't ever just push up on the faders. The risk of doing that is that you'll introduce clipping as you push the signal above 0 dBs. We never want to have any clipping in the audio. What we need to use is a plugin which will boost the volume without introducing any clipping. What we're going to use is a peak limiter. I'm using L2 by Waves, another one of their $29 discount bargains. But there are many other nice peak limiters available. There's a free one called loudness, which I highly recommend. I also have the isotope limiter, which sounds better than the Waves one. It's slightly more transparent, I think, and handles the transients better. But it just means that when I load a project, it takes absolutely ages to load. So I tend to use L2, which is a bit snappier. Let's disable it. So that's the raw audio track playing back there. All we need to do is pull down the threshold by, I've done it 11 dBs here. It would make sense to do it 10 dBs from 23 to 13, but I found that you need to add a little bit more to handle just the slight amount of compression that's going on here as well. Set the ceiling to about -0.1. You don't want to have 0 dB ceiling, meaning that the peaks will go all the way up to 0, because then when you transcode the video and upload it to YouTube, you can get a little bit of clipping there. So be a little bit careful. Set this to 0.1, -0.3, 0.5, somewhere around there. And that's the only adjustments I need to make on this particular one. Let's play through some audio here. we look at this plugin, you can see on this meter here, we're not doing any gain reduction at all, which is fantastic because we're not coloring or affecting the sound. We're not doing any compression. The way a peak limiter works is that once the sound goes, or what it actually does is turns down the volume of everything that goes above a particular threshold, giving you more headroom so that it can boost up the volume. And this dial, or this meter, shows us how much gain reduction is being applied over the threshold. And you can see there's nothing. If we crank down the threshold, you'll start to hear gain reduction being applied. There you go. And you don't want to see that much gain reduction going on, really. So there you have it. Those are the 3 plugins I use on every single video I upload to YouTube. Yes, I know they are not particularly sexy or glamorous, but those are the plugins that I cannot live without. I hope you found that helpful for your own productions. I'll see you next time. Cheerio!